You know the voice. It speaks when difficulty approaches, when the toll gate demands its payment, when the hard choice presents itself. Not now, it whispers. Later, when conditions improve. Tomorrow, when you feel stronger. Next month, when circumstances permit. The voice sounds reasonable. It sounds prudent. It sounds rather like wisdom. That voice is the coward within, the saboteur who keeps you small, the enemy who wears the mask of a friend. Every time you heed it, you purchase nothing with the suffering that arrives anyway. Every time you obey its counsel of delay, the opportunity to acquire capability, depth, and character expires whilst you wait for better conditions that never come. I know this voice well. I have heard it before every significant moment of my life. I have learned to recognize it, to greet it as an old adversary, and to proceed regardless. The pages that follow will teach you to do the same. They will show you why pain is not the enemy of achievement, but its very currency. They will reveal the price of greatness and demonstrate why cowards who pay nothing own nothing. Every man keeps a ledger, whether he knows it or not. This is the first truth I must impress upon you, and it is a truth from which there is no escape, no appeal, and no clever evasion. In the invisible accounting book of your existence, every choice is recorded with pitiless accuracy. Every difficulty faced enters as a credit. Every difficulty fled enters as a debit. The balance of this ledger determines not merely your success or failure in the eyes of the world, but something far more fundamental, the weight and substance of your soul itself. You must understand this clearly. The ledger cannot be fooled. It records reality, not intention. It cares nothing for your explanations, your justifications, your elaborate rationalizations for why this particular difficulty should be avoided, why that particular toll gate should be circumvented. The man who believes himself clever for finding ways around payment discovers at the final reckoning that his cleverness purchased only bankruptcy. I knew two men at Sandhurst who illustrate this principle with painful clarity. Both arrived in the same year. Both possessed of apparently equal gifts. Reginald came from an excellent family, enjoyed every advantage of connection and breeding, displayed a keen mind and athletic frame that seemed to promise brilliant things. Edmund possessed none of these advantages. His family was undistinguished, his resources modest, his physical gifts ordinary. He had only one thing Reginald lacked: determination. Over the years that followed, I watched their paths diverge, with the slow inevitability of rivers finding their courses. Reginald devoted his considerable intelligence to the art of avoidance. He perfected the skill of being elsewhere when difficult postings were assigned. He cultivated relationships that shielded him from hard duties. He developed an almost preternatural instinct for detecting which assignments offered advancement without discomfort, and positioned himself accordingly. Edmund, by contrast, volunteered for every hardship. He sought the difficult postings others fled. He accepted the thankless assignments. He paid at every toll gate. 30 years later, I encountered them both at a regimental dinner. Reginald remained a disappointed major, his face lined with a bitterness he could neither explain nor escape. He spoke at length about the unfairness of the system, the way merit went unrewarded, the mysterious forces that had conspired against his advancement. Edmund commanded divisions. When I asked him privately what he understood to be the secret of his rise, he answered with a simplicity that contained worlds. I paid in full at every toll gate. Reginald kept his coins and wondered why he never arrived anywhere. Now, consider what this means for your own ledger. Every time you stand before a difficulty and choose to face it, you make a deposit. The currency is discomfort, and the purchase is capability. Every time you turn away, you make a withdrawal from an account that was never properly funded. The mathematics are remorseless. The man who makes 100 small deposits accumulates a fortune in character. The man who makes 100 small withdrawals awakens one morning to find himself spiritually insolvent. But here is the peculiar thing about this economy that most men never grasp. The small payments compound. The man who pays the small toll today develops the capacity to pay the larger toll tomorrow. Each payment strengthens the muscle of confrontation. Each faced difficulty makes the next easier to face. Conversely, each evasion weakens the capacity to pay. The man who refuses small payments becomes progressively unable to make any payment at all. His account atrophies through disuse. I have observed this pattern across decades in Parliament, in the services, in society at large. The men who rose to meet the great crises of our time were not men who suddenly discovered courage when courage was required. They were men who had been paying small tolls for years, building the reserves that great moments demand. When the hour struck, they possessed what was needed. The evaders, when their hour struck, reached into empty pockets and found only dust. What then shall you do with this knowledge? I counsel you to begin immediately with an audit of your own ledger. This evening, take paper and divide it into 2 columns, credits and debits. In the first column, record honestly the difficulties you faced today. In the second, record the difficulties you evaded. Perform this audit for 7 consecutive days. At week's end, examine the balance. You shall discover, perhaps with some discomfort, exactly where you stand. Do not imagine that the ledger records only large transactions. This is a common error that leads many to ruin. The man who faces the great challenge but evades the small ones fools himself. The ledger records everything. The uncomfortable conversation avoided. The physical exertion declined. The honest admission postponed. Each enters the account with the same fidelity as the grand gestures. Another error. Believing one can pay later what should be paid now. Tomorrow, says the evader, when conditions are more favorable. But the ledger adds interest. Delay increases cost. The toll gate that demanded a shilling this morning demands a pound by evening. The difficulty that could have been faced with modest discomfort becomes, through postponement, a mountain of accumulated dread. Finally, abandon the belief that your cleverness fools the ledger. It does not. I have watched men of genuine brilliance waste their gifts in elaborate schemes to achieve without paying. They devoted more energy to finding shortcuts than the direct path would have required. They exhausted themselves running from the very experiences that would have made them. Their cleverness purchased nothing but the bitter knowledge, gained too late, that no amount of scheming circumvents the fundamental economy of achievement. After absorbing this chapter, you can no longer evade in ignorance. Every avoidance now carries conscious weight. The comfortable illusion that cleverness conquers the fundamental economy of achievement has been shattered. Where once you saw only discomfort to be dodged, you now see toll gates to be paid. This is painful knowledge. It is also liberating knowledge. For now you understand that the path to greatness is not mysterious. It is simply expensive. And the currency is one you possess. But wait, perhaps you accept the principle of the ledger, yet still harbor a secret hope. Perhaps you believe that others, the truly great, somehow found easier paths. Perhaps you imagine that Wellington felt less at Waterloo, that Nelson suffered less at Trafalgar, that achievement brings with it some immunity to pain. This comfortable fantasy must next be demolished. One of the most seductive lies whispered by the coward within is this, that the great possess some special immunity to suffering, some secret exemption from the toll gates the rest of us must pay. We look upon their achievements and imagine smooth paths, effortless victories, a charmed passage through difficulties that would crush ordinary souls. We comfort ourselves with the fantasy that their success came easier, that if we possessed their gifts, we too would rise without the painful payments our present situation demands. This is precisely backward. The truth is counterintuitive and therefore powerful. The great suffer more, not less, than ordinary men. They suffer more because they attempt more. They suffer more because they care more deeply. They suffer more because they refuse the anesthetic of mediocrity that deadens the nerves of lesser souls. To understand this is to understand everything about the relationship between pain and achievement. Consider Nelson at Trafalgar, if you will. The common seamen aboard those ships faced the terror of cannon fire, the chaos of battle, the immediate threat of death. This was suffering enough, and I do not diminish it. But what did Nelson face? He faced that same terror multiplied by responsibility for every life in the fleet. He faced the knowledge that his decisions would determine the fate of every ship, every man, every English home that depended upon victory. He bore upon his shoulders the weight of a nation's survival. When the musket ball struck him, he lay dying for hours in the cockpit of the Victory, in agony, receiving reports of the battle as it unfolded above him. "Thank God I have done my duty," he said with his final breaths. Those words are not the words of a man who found his path easy. They are the words of a man who paid in full, at the highest possible rate, for the purchase of greatness. His suffering that day exceeded that of any seaman aboard any ship, and his purchase exceeded theirs as well. The same truth holds for Wellington at Waterloo, for Marlborough at Blenheim, for every figure we elevate to the pantheon of achievement. The ordinary soldier suffers his own fear. The general suffers the fear of all under his command. The ordinary man risks his own failure. The leader risks the failure of thousands who trusted his judgment. Greater position means greater suffering. This is the first principle you must absorb. Now, why did the great accept this multiplication of suffering when they might, with their considerable abilities, have found easier paths? Here we arrive at the second principle. They refuse the anesthetic of mediocrity. You see, mediocrity numbs the soul. It provides a certain protection from the sharper edges of existence. The man who invests nothing in his work cannot be wounded by its failure. The man who cares nothing for his relationships cannot be hurt by their dissolution. The man who aims at nothing cannot miss. This numbness is available to anyone who wishes to purchase it. The price is your greatness. The great refuse this bargain. They choose to feel fully, knowing that full feeling includes full suffering. They invest deeply, knowing that deep investment means deep vulnerability. They aim high, knowing that high aims mean spectacular failures are possible alongside spectacular successes. I can speak to this from my own experience. During the years between the wars, when I warned repeatedly about the gathering storm from Germany, I was mocked, dismissed, treated as a tiresome Cassandra by those who wished to believe in peace at any price. The pain of being right when the world insists you are wrong is a particular and exquisite agony. I could have ceased my warnings. I could have joined the comfortable consensus and enjoyed the anesthetic of approval. But that path was not open to me. We see the great in their moments of triumph, rarely in their hours of anguish. This creates a dangerous illusion. When we observe the victorious general receiving the surrender of his enemy, we do not see the sleepless nights of planning, the agony of sending men to their deaths, the weight of decisions that will be judged by history. We see only the surface, the edited version, and we conclude falsely that the path was smoother than it was. What shall you do with this knowledge? First, when you feel the weight of increased responsibility, recognize it as the price of elevation. Do not resent it, expect it. The man who complains that leadership is burdensome reveals that he has not understood what leadership is. It is supposed to be burdensome. That is how you know you are doing it properly. Second, when someone you admire seems to move effortlessly through challenges that defeat you, investigate further. Behind every appearance of ease lies hidden struggle. The virtuoso pianist who seems to play without effort has paid thousands of hours of painful practice. The eloquent speaker who captivates effortlessly has endured hundreds of failures and humiliations. What you see is the dividend. What you do not see is the investment. Third, when the temptation comes to numb yourself against difficulty, to lower your aims, to reduce your investment so that failure will hurt less, remember that this numbness will also prevent growth. You cannot anesthetize yourself against pain whilst remaining sensitive to joy. You cannot reduce vulnerability to failure without reducing capacity for success. The same mechanism that prevents deep hurt prevents deep achievement. Do not mistake this teaching for a glorification of suffering for its own sake. The point is not that suffering is good. The point is that achievement without suffering is impossible. The man who seeks achievement whilst fleeing suffering seeks a contradiction. He might as well seek wetness without water or warmth without heat. The two are bound together by chains, forged in the very nature of reality. Here, then, is the liberation this chapter offers. If the great did not escape suffering, neither must you. If Nelson paid in full at Trafalgar, you are not uniquely cursed to pay at your own battles. If Wellington bore the weight of Waterloo, you are not singled out for the weights you bear. You are simply on the path. The path upward is the path of increasing, not decreasing, sensitivity to both pain and joy. The fantasy of painless achievement has been destroyed. You now understand that elevation necessarily entails increased, not decreased, suffering. But if evasion fails and the great suffer more, what exactly does the coward strategy purchase? What is the true return on the investment in avoidance? The answer is more terrible than you have yet imagined. Here we arrive at the most devastating truth of this opening section, a truth so uncomfortable that most men spend their entire lives constructing elaborate defenses against its recognition. The coward achieves not safety, but a peculiar and total bankruptcy of the soul. He imagines his strategy purchases protection. In fact, it purchases only a different and more terrible form of suffering. The permanent ache of unrealized potential, the haunting of the unlived life. You must understand this clearly, for it contradicts everything the coward tells himself. He believes he has made a shrewd bargain, exchanging the discomfort of striving for the comfort of ease. He congratulates himself on his wisdom, watches others struggle, and feels rather clever for having found the escape others missed. But examine his ledger at life's end, and you shall discover the true nature of his bargain. He has exchanged the productive pain of striving for the sterile pain of regret. He has traded temporary suffering that builds for permanent suffering that merely corrodes. His bargain is not merely poor, it is ruinous. I once sat with a man of 80 who had spent his life in systematic avoidance of difficulty. His strategy had succeeded magnificently by every external measure. He possessed comfort in abundance, a fine house, ample income, every material provision. No hardship had touched him in decades. He had perfected the art of the comfortable life, yet his face wore a look I shall never forget. It was not the face of a man at peace. It was a face lined with a haunted bitterness that no comfort could touch, no ease could soften. As we spoke, the source of this bitterness emerged. I played it safe, he told me, his voice carrying decades of accumulated regret. And I won nothing. Every morning I wake to the ghost of the man I might have been. That ghost tortures me more cruelly than any risk ever could have. Think of it this way. Every avoided challenge creates a ghost, a specter of who you might have become had you faced what you fled. The difficult conversation you never had creates the ghost of the relationship you might have deepened. The challenging project you never attempted creates the ghost of the capability you might have developed. The risk you never took creates the ghost of the reward you might have earned. These ghosts accumulate. The young man has few, his evasions are not yet numerous, but with each passing year, each accumulated avoidance, the army of spectral selves grows. By life's end, The evader is haunted by a multitude of unrealized possibilities, an army of ghosts representing all the man he might have been, all the depths he might have earned. Here is the terrible arithmetic the coward never calculates. Productive suffering, however intense, ends. It builds something and passes. The pain of difficult exertion subsides with rest. The pain of difficult conversation fades as understanding grows. The pain of difficult learning disappears as mastery develops. Productive pain is temporary because it achieves its purpose and departs. The pain of an unlived life never ends. It grows with each passing year, feeding on time itself. Every morning the evader wakes to the knowledge of what he did not become. Every achievement of others reminds him of what he did not attempt. Every remaining year makes the gap between his actual self and his potential self more visible and more painful. This is the only truly unbearable pain, the suffering that builds nothing, heals nothing, achieves nothing, and never, ever stops. The fire of challenge hurts but transforms. The iron that enters the forge emerges as a blade. The cold of evasion numbs but freezes. The man who avoids the fire remains forever a shapeless lump, untransformed, unuseful, unnamed by any worthy purpose. You must choose between the pain that makes and the pain that unmakes. What shall you do with this terrible knowledge? When tempted to evade, project forward. Ask yourself with ruthless honesty, how shall I feel about this choice at 80? Shall I regret the difficulty faced or the opportunity fled? Make decisions not for present comfort but for future self-respect. The discomfort of action is temporary. The regret of inaction is permanent. When you sense the ghost forming, the unrealized self being created by your evasion, act immediately. The ghost is dissoluble, but only by confrontation. Face what you have been fleeing, and the ghost vanishes, replaced by actual capability, actual relationship, actual achievement. But delay compounds the difficulty. Ghosts grow stronger with time. I counsel you to perform this exercise. Sit quietly for 10 minutes and imagine yourself at 80, looking back upon the life you are currently living. What regrets accumulate from today's evasions? What ghosts would form from the choices you are presently making? Write a letter from your 80-year-old self to your present self. What would that wiser, sadder self advise? This exercise clarifies the true stakes of present choices as nothing else can. Do not confuse this teaching with recklessness. The counsel is not to pursue every risk, to face every difficulty regardless of wisdom. The counsel is to recognize that avoiding meaningful challenges purchases nothing of value. The error is believing that comfort compounds. It does not. Comfort is spent in the moment. Only capability compounds. Only character earns interest. Only paid tolls accumulate. Neither should you believe it is ever too late. The ghosts multiply, yes, but confrontation at any age dissolves them. The man who begins paying at 50 has fewer years than the man who began at 20, but his payments still count. His ledger still records. His purchases still accumulate. It is never too late to begin, though it is always costly to have delayed. The comfortable lies of this first section lie shattered around us. You cannot now believe that pain can be escaped. You cannot believe that the great suffer less. You cannot believe that evasion purchases safety. The ground has been cleared. The old edifice has been demolished. You stand ready to learn what might be built in its place. For if pain cannot be avoided, what is its proper relationship to achievement? Part 2 shall answer, pain is not obstacle but currency. Let me now state my core philosophical position with the clarity it deserves. Pain is not a tax upon achievement, it is the currency of achievement. This distinction, though it may seem subtle, transforms everything. A tax is extracted from you by external authority against your will. Currency is spent by you upon purchases of your choosing. You are not a victim having suffering extracted from you. You are an agent spending suffering upon what you wish to acquire. When you grasp this shift, your entire orientation to difficulty changes. The question is no longer, how can I avoid this pain? The question becomes, what can I purchase with this pain? Every difficulty that arrives is an opportunity to acquire something of value. The price is paid in discomfort. The goods on offer include strength, wisdom, resilience, skill, character. The currency in your pocket can buy any of them, but only if spent. I arrived at this understanding not through philosophical speculation in comfortable libraries, but through the crucible of lived experience. During my wilderness years in the 1930s, when my warnings about Germany were mocked and I was dismissed as a warmonger and a fool, I faced a choice that every man faces when suffering arrives. I could resent the pain of being right when the world insisted I was wrong, treating it as unfair extraction, as a tax upon my character levied by an unjust universe. Or I could spend it. I could invest this pain in developing capacities I would need when darker days arrived. I chose the latter. Every dismissal became payment for deeper conviction. Every mockery purchased greater resolve. Every lonely year in political exile bought reserves of determination I could not have acquired any other way. When the hour finally came, when the nation turned to me in its desperate need, I had purchased what was needed with currency I had spent wisely. Think of it this way. You hold the currency of suffering. You may spend it or waste it, but you cannot avoid receiving it. The market of achievement offers many goods: endurance, courage, patience, skill, wisdom, strength of will. Each has its price. Physical exhaustion, properly spent, purchases endurance. Rejection, properly spent, purchases resilience. Confusion, properly spent, purchases understanding. The choice is never whether to suffer, but what to purchase with your suffering. The transformation this understanding produces is profound. When pain arrives, the victim asks, "Why me?" The investor asks, "What can I buy?" The victim endures passively, hoping for the suffering to end, gaining nothing from its passage. The investor engages actively, extracting value from every moment of difficulty, emerging with actual acquisitions. Both suffer equally. One emerges with empty pockets, the other with full ones. Here is the technique I counsel you to adopt. When difficulty strikes, pause before reacting. Do not permit the instinctive response of victimhood to take hold. Instead, ask aloud if you must, "What can I purchase with this?" The question itself changes the neurological response to difficulty. It shifts you from passive endurance to active investment. It transforms the experience from something happening to you into something you are using. Keep a mental ledger of your purchases. At each day's end, review. Today, my suffering purchased patience in the matter of the delayed contract, greater skill in managing the difficult colleague, and clearer understanding of my own priorities. This accounting prevents waste. It ensures that no pain passes without yielding its potential value. I recommend you keep a written journal for 1 week with 3 columns: difficulty faced, price paid, purchase made. Record each significant suffering, note its cost in discomfort, and identify what you acquired. At week's end, review the pattern of your investments. You shall discover, perhaps with some surprise, that you have been wealthier than you knew, that difficulties you resented were actually enriching you, that your suffering was accomplishing more than your complaints acknowledged. Several errors must be avoided in this practice. The first is passive endurance, suffering without purchasing, merely waiting for pain to end, without extracting its value. This wastes the currency entirely. The suffering occurs, the purchase does not. You pay and receive nothing. The second error is resentful endurance, treating pain as unfair theft rather than investment capital, complaining about the extraction rather than directing the expenditure. The resentful sufferer pays the same price as the wise investor, but gains only bitterness, not capability. The third error is undirected spending, suffering without clarity about what is being purchased. Vague pain produces nothing. Directed pain produces everything. When you suffer, know what you are buying. If you cannot identify the purchase, redirect your attention until you can. Your relationship to pain has now fundamentally shifted. Where once stood a victim resenting extraction, now stands an investor choosing purchases. Difficulty is no longer something that happens to you, but something you use. This is power. This is the foundation upon which all else shall be built. But if pain is currency, how does the transaction actually work? What is the mechanism by which suffering becomes strength? The next chapter reveals the answer. Pain operates as sculptor, teacher, and alchemist. Pain operates upon us in three distinct capacities, and understanding each transforms how we receive difficulty. As teacher, pain instructs us in truths we could learn no other way. As sculptor, it carves away what is unnecessary to reveal the essential form within. As alchemist, it transmutes base material into gold. These are not mere metaphors, but precise descriptions of how suffering produces growth. The central image I wish to fix in your mind is the blacksmith's forge. Consider the iron that lies cold and shapeless upon the floor of the smithy. It possesses potential, yes, but potential is not actuality. Left untouched, it remains forever what it is, a lump of possibility, never a blade. To become something of use and beauty, it must enter the fire. The fire is hot. The iron, if it could speak, might cry out against the flames. The hammer falls again and again. The iron, if it could feel, might protest against the blows. But what is the alternative? To remain a shapeless lump, useless, unnamed, unmarked by any worthy purpose. The wise iron, if such a thing could exist, would welcome the fire. It would embrace the hammer. For it would understand that only through these apparent cruelties can it become what it was meant to be. I witnessed this transformation firsthand at Omdurman in the Sudan, where I rode with the 21st Lancers in the last great cavalry charge of the British Army. Young soldiers entered that battle as raw material, untested, uncertain of their own constitution. The terror of combat taught them what no lecture could convey. The chaos of the fighting sculpted away false confidence, leaving true courage. The alchemy of battle transmuted boys into men. Those who survived the forge emerged as blades. Some bent, they had been heated beyond their capacity. Some broke, they had fundamental flaws the fire revealed. But many emerged tempered, harder, finer, capable of service they could never have rendered in their original state. The difference lay not in the fire's heat, but in the iron's constitution. And constitution itself is developed through smaller fires, earlier forges. Let me now explain each role with precision. Pain as teacher instructs us in truths we could learn no other way. There are certain lessons that simply cannot be transmitted through words or observation. They must be lived. The lesson of your own limits cannot be taught. It must be discovered through the pain of reaching them. The lesson of your hidden reserves cannot be taught. It must be discovered through the pain of needing them. The lesson of genuine humility cannot be taught. It must be beaten into you by defeats that shatter arrogance. When difficulty arrives, ask, "What is this teaching me that I could learn no other way?" The lesson may be patience. Only frustrated plans teach patience. The lesson may be empathy. Only personal suffering teaches understanding of others' suffering. A lesson may be resilience. Only recovery from setback teaches resilience. Extract the teaching consciously. Do not let the pain pass without demanding its lesson. Pain as sculptor carves away what is unnecessary to reveal the essential form within. The sculptor does not add marble to create his statue, he removes it. The form exists within the block. The artist's task is to eliminate what conceals it. So too with character. Your essential self lies buried beneath layers of illusion, pretension, false security. Pain carves these away. When difficulty strikes, ask, what is being carved away? Often what hurts most is the removal of something we valued but did not need. The loss of a false friendship reveals who truly stood beside you. The failure of a cherished plan reveals what you actually wanted. The stripping away of comfortable assumptions reveals the bedrock of genuine conviction. The sculpting hurts because removal hurts, but what remains is more true than what was lost. Pain, as alchemist, transmutes base material into gold. The medieval alchemists sought to transform lead into precious metal. They failed because they did not understand the true nature of transformation. But the alchemy of suffering succeeds where chemistry fails. Fear, properly processed, becomes courage. Weakness, properly processed, becomes strength. Confusion, properly processed, becomes clarity. The base metal of your inadequacy can become the gold of your capability. When difficulty arrives, ask, what base material is being transmuted? But understand, you must allow the transmutation. You must cooperate with the process. The man who resists the alchemy, who clings to his lead whilst demanding gold, receives nothing. The transformation requires surrender to the fire. It requires acceptance of the process. It requires trust that what emerges will exceed what entered. Here is practical guidance for applying this triple framework. When difficulty strikes, pause. Identify which role pain is playing. Teacher, sculptor, or alchemist, perhaps all three simultaneously. Different roles require different responses. To the teacher, bring attention and humility. You are the student. Pain is the instructor. Listen, learn. Do not argue with the lesson or resent the teacher. Extract the knowledge being offered. To the sculptor, bring surrender of what must go. Do not cling to the marble being removed. Do not mourn the illusions being stripped away. Trust that what remains will be truer and finer than what is lost. To the alchemist, bring the raw material of what you were that it might become what you shall be. Offer your fear for transmutation into courage. Offer your weakness for transmutation into strength. Cooperate with the transformation. The errors to avoid are these: resisting all three roles, fighting the teaching, refusing the sculpting, blocking the alchemy. This wastes the opportunity entirely. Another error: expecting the process to feel pleasant. The forge is hot. The hammer hurts. The alchemy burns. Accept this: the purpose is not comfort but transformation. Remember also the forge progression. Small fires prepare for large fires. The blade that has known small heats can endure great ones. Seek appropriate challenges that develop your capacity for greater ones. Do not wait for the great fire whilst avoiding the small ones. The small fires are the preparation. You now possess a framework for understanding how pain transforms. Where once stood mysterious affliction, now stands comprehensible process. The forge, the hammer, and the blade are no longer mere metaphors, but practical categories for receiving difficulty with intelligence rather than mere endurance. But there is an urgency you may not yet fully grasp. The currency of pain cannot be saved. The opportunity exists now or never. The next chapter reveals why delay is fatal. Here is the truth that cowards never grasp, the truth that destroys their clever schemes and exposes their postponements for what they are. The currency of pain cannot be hoarded. You cannot save it for later. You cannot invest it for compound returns at some more convenient season. You can only spend it in the moment upon the purchase of growth, or you can refuse it and receive nothing. The opportunity exists now or not at all. This is the fundamental law of the economy we have been examining. There is no layaway plan for greatness. There is no deferred suffering arrangement. The coward who turns away from pain today does not become richer tomorrow. He becomes poorer, having missed the only opportunity to acquire what matters. The toll gate will not wait. Pass or turn back. Those are the only options. I watched a colleague in Parliament demonstrate this principle with tragic clarity across the span of his career. He was a man of genuine ability, possessing a mind sharp enough to see the right course and a constitution too weak to take it. His particular genius lay in the art of deferral. Every difficult vote, every controversial position, every uncomfortable stand that his conscience demanded, he postponed with the same magic word, later. Later, he would say, when the timing is better. Later, when my position is more secure. Later, when the political winds have shifted. But here is the peculiar thing about later that this man never understood. The timing was never better. His position was never more secure. The winds never shifted to his satisfaction. Each deferral made the next more necessary, for each act of cowardice weakened the muscle that courage requires. At career's end, I saw him at a club dinner, a shrunken figure surrounded by the ghosts of all he had not done. He had never spent a single coin of political capital. He had never voted his conscience when it cost something. He had never stood for principle when principle demanded sacrifice. He had saved his currency until it was worthless, for currency not spent upon character development expires utterly. It cannot be passed along. It cannot be cashed in at life's end. It simply ceases to exist. You must understand why this expiration occurs. Every opportunity to suffer productively is unique. It arrives once, in its particular form, demanding its particular payment, offering its particular purchase. Miss it, and it does not return. The difficulty you face today can only be spent today. Tomorrow brings different difficulties, different currencies, different opportunities. But the specific growth that today's difficulty could have purchased is lost forever. Consider the young officer who avoids his first taste of command responsibility. The opportunity to learn leadership at that stage with those subordinates in those circumstances expires with the posting. He may learn leadership later, yes, but he will never learn what that particular crucible could have taught him. The lesson was available once. He declined. The examination moved on without him. The coward believes he can pay later what should be paid now. This is the deferred payment illusion, and it is fatal. The bill is presented once. Refusing payment does not postpone it. It cancels the opportunity forever. You do not owe the toll gate. The toll gate owes you nothing. It merely offers passage in exchange for payment. Decline, and both the payment and the passage vanish. There is also the matter of atrophy to consider. The capacity for productive suffering, like muscle, withers without use. The man who defers all difficulty becomes progressively less able to face any. His very capacity to pay diminishes through disuse. I have seen this in soldiers who avoided training hardships and then crumbled in actual combat. I have seen it in politicians who avoided small controversies and then collapsed before large ones. The muscle of confrontation requires regular exercise. What shall you do with this knowledge? First, translate the word later whenever you catch yourself thinking it. Later means never. This is what later actually means in the economy of achievement. The man who says, "I shall face this later," is saying, "I shall never face this." He may not know it, but the ledger knows it. Make the translation explicit. Hear your own evasion clearly. Second, when difficulty presents itself, ask immediately, "If I do not spend this currency now, shall I ever have it again?" The answer is invariably no. Each toll gate appears once in its exact form. Third, treat every chance to suffer productively as the expiring opportunity it is. You would not let gold coins dissolve in your pocket. Do not let opportunities for growth dissolve in your hesitation. I counsel you to perform this exercise for 3 days. Every time you think, I shall do this later, or I shall face this tomorrow, stop. Translate, I am choosing never. Then decide with full knowledge, is never acceptable? If not, act now. This practice destroys the illusion that deferral is neutral. It reveals deferral's true nature. Do not confuse genuine strategic timing with disguised evasion. They appear similar but differ fundamentally. Strategic delay has specific conditions. I shall act when X occurs. Evasion has only the word later floating without anchor. When you find yourself postponing, ask, what specific condition am I waiting for? If you cannot name it, you are not strategizing, you are fleeing. Begin developing the habit of immediate payment. Small tolls paid promptly develop the capacity for larger ones. The man who pays the trivial toll without complaint strengthens his ability to pay the substantial one. Do not wait for significant opportunities to begin this practice. Every day presents toll gates. Every day presents chances to pay or to evade. Use them all. The illusion of future payment has now been destroyed. You understand that later means never, that currency expires, that capacity atrophies through disuse. This understanding creates appropriate urgency. Part 2 is complete. Pain is understood as currency, as transformation mechanism, and as expiring opportunity. But hold, if all pain is currency, must all pain be spent? Is there no discrimination between valuable and worthless suffering? Part 3 addresses this essential question. Not all pain is equal. Not all pain is equal. This is a truth the crude mind misses entirely, and the wise mind grasps with precision. The pain of growth differs in quality from the pain of decay. The pain of striving differs from the pain of stagnation. Just as the wine connoisseur can distinguish vintages invisible to the ordinary drinker, just as the trained musician can hear dissonances the untrained ear cannot detect, so the educated character can taste the difference between suffering that builds and suffering that merely damages. This discrimination separates wisdom from mere experience. This discernment is essential to wisdom. Without it, one might seek out pointless suffering under the mistaken belief that all pain produces growth. One might embrace destructive hardship thinking it productive. One might waste years in torments that yield nothing whilst avoiding the specific difficulties that would have made one great. The palate must be trained. A young officer at the Northwest frontier once asked me how to distinguish valuable hardship from mere cruelty. He had observed that some suffering seemed to strengthen the men whilst others merely broke them, and he wished to understand the difference. I gave him this answer, which I now give to you. Watch the soldiers who have served longest. They accept certain sufferings with something approaching enthusiasm and resist others with every fiber. The difference is not in intensity, but in kind. Productive suffering has a particular taste, a quality of investment about it. There is direction to it, purpose within it, future contained in it. Destructive suffering tastes only of waste. It leads nowhere, builds nothing, points toward no improvement. Learn to tell them apart, I told that young officer, for your survival and the survival of your men depends upon it. Let me now describe the 4 tastes of pain that the educated palate learns to recognize. Growth pain stretches you toward expanded capacity. It hurts because you are reaching beyond your current limits. Decay pain shrinks you toward diminishment. It hurts because something vital is being lost. Striving pain moves you forward. It is the pain of progress, the ache of advancement. Stagnation pain holds you still. It is the dull misery of going nowhere. The crucial insight is this: you cannot distinguish these tastes by their immediate sensation. Growth pain and decay pain can feel identical in the moment. Striving pain and stagnation pain can be indistinguishable whilst you are experiencing them. The difference reveals itself in the after effects. Judge pain not by its intensity, but by what remains when it passes. Productive suffering leaves you expanded, even if exhausted. You may be depleted, but you are larger than you were. Destructive suffering leaves you contracted, even if rested. You may have energy, but you are smaller than you were. This is the after effect test, and it is the most reliable guide I know to pain's quality. There is also the matter of purpose to consider. Pain connected to meaningful purpose tastes different from pain without meaning. Even identical sensations differ in quality when purpose is present. Consider the difference between the soldier marching toward battle and the prisoner marching to pointless labor. The physical exhaustion may be identical. The quality is utterly different. Purpose transforms the taste of suffering. The veteran's perception develops through exposure. Those who have suffered productively many times recognize the taste instantly. They know within moments whether a particular difficulty carries the flavor of investment or the flavor of waste. This recognition cannot be fully taught. It must be developed through experience. But knowing that such discrimination exists is the first step toward acquiring it. What shall you do with this understanding? When in difficulty, pause to taste the quality of pain. Ask yourself, does this feel like growth or decay, striving or stagnation? Do not answer immediately. Allow the question to penetrate. Examine the after effects of various sufferings in your life. Notice which leave you larger and which leave you smaller. Begin building a personal catalog of pain qualities. I counsel you to keep a record for a fortnight. After each significant difficulty, note 3 things: the pain itself, its quality as you perceive it, and the after effect when it passes. Review this record weekly. Patterns shall emerge. You shall begin to recognize pain's flavors before the after effects confirm them. This is the development of the educated palate. Several errors must be avoided. First, do not judge pain by intensity alone. Gentle pain can be deeply productive. The quiet discomfort of consistent discipline builds enormously. Intense pain can be utterly pointless. Spectacular suffering in meaningless endeavor yields nothing. Second, do not seek all pain indiscriminately. This is masochism, not wisdom. The goal is productive suffering, not suffering as such. Third, do not remain at the novice stage, unable to distinguish vintage from vinegar. Invest in developing your palate. Seek the counsel of those who have suffered wisely. Ask them to describe the taste of productive versus destructive pain. Their descriptions, though imperfect, shall accelerate your education. Study the lives of those you admire and examine how they discriminated between sufferings worth embracing and sufferings worth avoiding. Over time, discrimination develops naturally through attentive experience. The man who pays attention to his suffering, who examines it with curiosity rather than mere endurance, develops the palate faster than the man who merely waits for pain to pass. Be a student of your own difficulties. Extract not only the purchase, but also the lesson about pain itself. You can now begin to distinguish pain qualities. The crude perception that pain is pain has been refined. Where once stood undifferentiated suffering, now stands a spectrum of qualities to be recognized and evaluated. Wisdom becomes possible when discrimination develops. But here is a peculiar truth you may not expect. Productive pain, once recognized, becomes strangely appetizing. The next chapter explores this unexpected hunger. Something peculiar happens as discernment develops, something the novice cannot imagine until he experiences it himself. Productive pain begins to carry within it the seeds of its own appetite. The soldier in training comes to crave the exertion that once exhausted him, for he has felt his strength grow beneath it. The scholar comes to welcome the confusion that once demoralized him, for he has watched understanding emerge from the fog. The difficulty itself becomes desirable. This is not masochism. Let me be clear on this point, for it is commonly misunderstood. The craving is not for pain itself, but for the growth that productive pain produces. The association between difficulty and development becomes so strong that the soul begins to seek difficulty as the means to the development it desires. What once required willpower eventually requires only permission. The polo player knows this appetite well, and I speak from experience. At first, the bruises and falls are merely painful. There is nothing pleasant about being thrown from a horse, nothing enjoyable about the aches that follow a hard-fought match. The novice endures these discomforts because he wishes to play. They are costs, not benefits. Then, as skill develops, something shifts. The discomfort becomes associated with improvement. The bruise becomes evidence of daring attempted. The ache becomes proof of effort extended. The pain becomes the teacher's voice, confirming that the lesson was received. Eventually, one seeks the challenging match not despite its difficulty, but because of it. One knows that easy victories teach nothing, that comfortable play improves nothing. I have watched this transformation in every field of human endeavor where excellence is pursued. The appetite for good difficulty that marks the transition from novice to devotee. The musician who once dreaded practice comes to crave it. The soldier who once feared the field exercise comes to relish it. The statesman who once avoided difficult debates comes to seek them out. The mechanism is always the same. Let me explain the cycle by which this craving develops. Pain produces growth. You face a difficulty and emerge larger than you entered. Growth produces satisfaction. You feel the expansion of your capacities and it pleases you. Satisfaction produces positive association. The pain that caused the growth becomes linked in memory with the pleasure that followed. Association produces craving. You begin to seek similar pain because you desire similar satisfaction. This cycle transforms your relationship to difficulty entirely. The novice dreads practice. The devotee craves it. The difference lies not in the difficulty itself, which may be identical, but in the accumulated experience of difficulty producing growth. Time and consistency create the appetite. There are no shortcuts. Once the appetite develops, a self-reinforcing system takes hold. The appetite drives you toward more difficulty. More difficulty produces more growth. More growth strengthens the appetite. The virtuous cycle accelerates advancement. The man who has developed this appetite advances faster than the man still operating on willpower alone, for his motivation is internal and inexhaustible. There is also a diagnostic sign worth noting: the symptom of missing difficulty. When the appetite is fully developed, the absence of appropriate challenge feels wrong. The well-trained soul becomes restless without productive struggle, just as the well-trained body becomes restless without exercise. Comfort ceases to feel comfortable. Ease begins to feel like deprivation. I can speak to this from my own experience. During periods when circumstances prevented meaningful challenge, when I was removed from positions of responsibility, or when events conspired to leave me without worthy opponents, I felt not relief, but a peculiar emptiness. The forge had grown cold. The hammer was silent. I was not being made into anything. This restlessness drove me back toward difficulty as soon as possibility permitted. How does one cultivate this appetite deliberately? By consistently pairing difficulty with conscious recognition of growth. After productive pain, note explicitly what was gained. Do not allow the growth to pass unobserved. Build the association deliberately. Say to yourself, this difficulty purchased this capacity. This suffering acquired this strength. Over time, the pairing becomes automatic. The mind learns to anticipate growth whenever difficulty approaches. Seek out challenges at the edge of your capacity, where growth is visible and immediate. The challenge too far beyond you produces only frustration. The challenge too far below produces only boredom. The challenge at the edge, difficult but achievable, produces both growth and the awareness of growth. Celebrate the discomfort as you celebrate the development it produces. Let them become linked in your experience. Over time, you shall begin to seek one because you desire the other. The appetite emerges as consequence, not as forced outcome. Several warnings attend this teaching. Do not confuse this appetite with masochism. The craving is for growth, not for pain itself. The appetite is for the right difficulty, not for any difficulty. Do not seek pain beyond your capacity. Appetite should guide toward appropriate challenge, not toward destruction. Do not be impatient. Appetite develops over time through repeated cycles. Forcing it produces false relationship to difficulty. You now understand that the relationship to productive pain can transform from tolerance to appetite. What once required willpower may eventually require only permission. This is the mark of maturing practice. The soul begins to seek what it once fled. But if such appetite exists, why do men resist it? Why does the coward within continue to whisper against difficulty even when experience has proved its value? There is a saboteur within who must be identified and silenced. The whispers of the mind that urge evasion are the voice of the coward within, that saboteur who has kept us small and safe and ultimately unfulfilled. This internal voice speaks with urgency and apparent reasonableness. He sounds sensible, prudent, even wise. He must be identified and overruled. Until you can recognize his voice, you cannot disregard his counsel. Until you can name him, you cannot defeat him. This chapter teaches the art of recognizing and silencing this most persistent of enemies. Before every significant speech in Parliament, before every major decision of my public life, a voice within would catalog the risks with meticulous care. "They shall mock you," it would whisper. "The timing is wrong. Perhaps tomorrow would be better." Consider your reputation. Think of what you have to lose. The arguments were always plausible. The counsel was always to retreat. I learned over decades of such internal struggle to recognize this voice, to greet it almost as an old adversary. Ah, there you are again. The greeting itself diminished its power. Named and acknowledged, the coward shrank. I would then proceed regardless of his protests. He never departed entirely. One does not kill one's inner coward. One merely learns to overrule him with decreasing effort. He becomes a familiar nuisance rather than a controlling presence. The coward within wears 5 masks, and you must learn to see through each to the evasion beneath. The first mask is prudence. Be careful, he counsels. Consider the risks. Is this truly necessary? The second mask is timing. Not yet, he whispers. The moment is not right. Wait for better conditions. The third mask is preparation. You are not ready, he insists. You need more knowledge, more skill, more experience. The fourth mask is reputation. What will they think? He asks. Consider how this will appear. Your standing is at risk. The fifth mask is false virtue. You deserve rest, he soothes. You have worked hard enough. Taking care of yourself is wisdom. Each mask appears reasonable. Each argument sounds sensible. But beneath every mask is the same face, fear. Beneath every argument is the same counsel, flee. How does one distinguish the coward's voice from genuine wisdom? For wisdom does sometimes counsel caution. It is not always courageous to advance. The test is this. Genuine wisdom proposes alternative action, whilst cowardice proposes only retreat. When the internal voice says, "Do not do this," ask immediately, "What do you propose instead?" If the answer is nothing, if the alternative is merely absence of action, you are hearing the coward. Wisdom offers a different path. Cowardice offers only paralysis. There is also a difference in texture. Genuine wisdom feels clean. You may not like its counsel, but it carries clarity. Cowardice feels slippery. The arguments shift and multiply, each one designed to justify inaction. When you notice the arguments breeding, when one reason for delay spawns three more, you are hearing the coward. He compensates for weakness of argument with quantity of argument. Once the coward is recognized, how does one overrule him? The first technique is the greeting practice. When his voice arises, greet it explicitly. I see you. Name it aloud if you must. This is the coward speaking. I recognize you. This alone diminishes his power. The coward operates best in shadows. Named and greeted, he shrinks. He cannot bear the light of explicit identification. The second technique is to overrule without argument. Do not debate the coward. Overrule him. Argument feeds him. He delights in extended discussion, for every moment of debate is a moment of delay, and delay is his truest victory. Brief acknowledgment followed by immediate action starves him. Noted. Proceeding anyway. These three words end more internal debates than hours of reasoning. Do not give him the platform of your attention. Act whilst he is still preparing his next objection. I counsel you to keep a record for 1 week of every instance of internal resistance. Note the mask worn. Was it prudence, timing, preparation, reputation, or false virtue? Note the argument offered. Note whether you overruled or obeyed. At week's end, you shall know your coward intimately. You shall know his favorite masks, his strongest arguments, your points of greatest vulnerability. This knowledge is the foundation of consistent victory. Know your enemy, and you are halfway to defeating him. Several errors must be avoided. Do not argue with the coward. It strengthens him. Do not hate his presence. Hatred creates internal war that exhausts you. Accept that he exists. Overrule without animosity. He is part of your constitution, a relic of the survival instinct that once served genuine purpose. He does not deserve your hatred. He merely deserves to be overruled. Do not confuse the coward's voice with genuine wisdom's voice. They differ in proposal and in texture. Learn the difference. When in doubt, ask what alternative action is proposed. No alternative means cowardice. Clear alternative means wisdom worth considering. You can now identify the internal saboteur and overrule him efficiently. The voice of evasion, once anonymous and powerful, is now a known quantity. Part 3 is complete. You can discriminate pain quality, you can develop appetite for productive difficulty, and you can silence the coward within. Armed with these capabilities, you are ready for Part 4, the integration of these principles into the actual conduct of daily life. The practice of voluntary hardship is the great secret of those who seem to handle adversity with impossible grace. When you see a man meet crisis with preternatural calm, when you observe someone navigate catastrophe as though it were routine, you are witnessing the dividend of investments made long before the crisis arrived. These people have been preparing all along. They have been paying in small installments what others must pay all at once. When the great storm strikes, they possess reserves that those who fled from difficulty cannot even imagine. During the darkest days of the war, when the fate of civilization hung upon decisions made in a single room, men remarked upon my apparent composure. They saw the surface and imagined some special gift, some natural immunity to the pressures that would have crushed ordinary men. What they did not see were the decades of preparation, the forced marches of youth, the deliberate seeking of difficulty at every stage of my career, the consistent payment of small tolls that developed the capacity for the great ones. When the hour came when the nation turned to me in its desperate need, I was not meeting difficulty for the first time. I was meeting a familiar adversary with muscles long since developed for the fight. The reserves I drew upon had been deposited over a lifetime. The composure they observed was not gift but purchase, paid for in full across decades of voluntary hardship. You must understand this principle clearly. The practice of voluntary hardship means deliberately seeking appropriate challenges before life imposes its own. It means paying in small installments what might otherwise come due all at once. It means building reserves before the bankruptcy of crisis demands them. The man who waits for crisis to develop his capacity discovers too late that capacity cannot be built in the moment it is needed. Here is the first technique. Establish at least one voluntary difficulty each day. The specific content matters less than the consistency. Cold water in the morning, physical exertion that presses against your limits. A difficult conversation you would rather postpone, an uncomfortable task you would rather delegate. The payment need not be large. What matters is that it is made daily, without exception, without negotiation, with the coward within. This daily hardship minimum builds something money cannot purchase, the habit of facing difficulty rather than fleeing it. Over time, this habit becomes your default orientation. Where others see problems to be avoided, you see toll gates to be paid. Where others calculate the cost of action, you calculate the cost of inaction. The habit transforms perception itself. The installment payment principle governs how this daily practice should progress. Do not attempt the greatest challenges first. Pay consistently at the level just beyond comfort, then gradually increase as capacity grows. The soldier does not begin with the longest march. He begins with the first mile. But he marches that first mile, and then the second, and the third, until distances that once seemed impossible become routine. Each voluntary hardship adds to your reserves. This is the reserve-building effect, and it operates with a reliability of compound interest. The man who has faced 100 small difficulties possesses reserves to meet one great difficulty. The man who has evaded all small difficulties is bankrupt when great difficulty arrives. He reaches into his reserves and finds nothing but dust. His account was never funded. There is also the matter of cross-domain transfer to consider. Capacity built in one domain transfers to others. Physical hardship builds mental resilience. Social discomfort builds emotional strength. Intellectual struggle builds character fortitude. The soldier who has mastered physical exhaustion handles emotional exhaustion better than the man who has avoided both. Train anywhere, benefit everywhere. What shall you do with this teaching? Begin each day with one voluntary hardship before the demands of the day dictate your difficulties. The cold wash, the early rising, the physical exertion before breakfast. This establishes the day's orientation. You are the seeker of difficulty, not the victim of it. You begin each day with a victory over the coward within. In professional life, take the difficult assignment before it is forced upon you. Volunteer for the thankless project. Accept the challenging posting. Seek the demanding superior. Each choice builds reserves and signals to yourself and others that you are someone who pays rather than evades. The reputation for embracing difficulty becomes itself a form of capital, attracting opportunities that flee from the evader. In personal life, initiate the uncomfortable conversation before resentment demands it. Address the difficult topic before it festers. Pay the price of honesty before dishonesty becomes your only currency. The man who pays small relational tolls daily never accumulates the crushing debt that destroys marriages and friendships. I counsel you to establish a protocol, one physical, one mental, and one social voluntary hardship per week as minimum. Physical, exercise that genuinely challenges your current limit, that leaves you knowing you have extended yourself. Mental, study or work that strains your comprehension, that forces you beyond comfortable competence. Social, conversation that requires courage you would rather not summon, that demands vulnerability you would prefer to withhold. Track these for 1 month. Notice the accumulating reserves, the increasing capacity to meet involuntary difficulty when it arrives. Several errors must be avoided in this practice. The error of excess. Seeking hardship beyond capacity damages rather than develops. The muscle torn beyond repair does not grow stronger. It simply tears. Know your limits even as you press against them. The mistake of irregularity. Sporadic voluntary hardship builds nothing. Consistency is essential. One cold morning followed by a week of warm ones accomplishes nothing. The forge must burn continuously. The danger of performance. Seeking hardship that others see rather than hardship that develops you. The goal is capacity, not applause. Many a man has performed difficulty for an audience whilst avoiding it in private. You now possess specific techniques for building reserves before crisis demands them. Where once stood passive waiting for life's demands, now stands active preparation for them. The soldier's march begins with the first mile. The first mile has been specified. The practice of voluntary hardship transforms you from the victim of circumstance into the architect of capability. Begin today. Begin now. For the reserves you build in times of peace determine your survival in times of war. But where precisely does one apply these principles beyond general discipline? Professional life offers constant opportunities for such investment, and these opportunities determine the arc of career. The next chapter examines the forge of vocation, where professional life becomes crucible, and daily work becomes the anvil upon which character is shaped. In professional life, those who rise are not those who most cleverly avoided painful assignments, but those who sought them out. This truth I have observed across decades in the Admiralty, the War Office, and Parliament itself. Men of apparently equal gifts diverge over time into vastly different destinies, and the difference lies not in their native talents but in their relationship to professional difficulty. The career path is not a passive experience to which things happen. It is an active investment strategy in which difficulties are currency and capabilities are purchase. Let me illustrate with a tale of two young men who entered the civil service in the same year with equivalent credentials. Their examination results were nearly identical. Their family connections were comparable. Their initial postings placed them in similar positions of modest responsibility. From this equal beginning, they charted courses that could not have diverged more completely. The first, whom I shall call Harrison, devoted his considerable intelligence to the art of comfortable advancement. He systematically avoided every uncomfortable posting, every thankless project, every difficult superior. When the hard assignments were distributed, Harrison was elsewhere. When the challenging postings opened, Harrison had arranged to be unsuitable. When demanding superiors sought staff, Harrison had cultivated a reputation for being better suited to gentler management. The second, whom I shall call Pemberton, displayed a peculiar enthusiasm for precisely what Harrison avoided. He sought the uncomfortable postings, others fled. He volunteered for the thankless projects that offered no glory. He requested assignment to the demanding superiors, whose exacting standards drove lesser men to transfer. His colleagues thought him rather odd. Some thought him foolish. 20 years later, I encountered them both at a government function. Harrison remained in his original department, perpetually passed over, his face lined with the bitter conviction that the system had treated him unfairly. He spoke at length about the injustices he had suffered, the promotions given to less worthy men, the mysterious forces that had conspired against his advancement. Pemberton had risen to permanent secretary. When I asked him privately about the contrast, he answered simply, "I paid more. Every difficult assignment was an investment in capability." Harrison kept his comfort and bought nothing. Here, then, is the first principle of professional advancement. Volunteer for what others avoid. The difficult assignment develops capabilities that the easy assignment cannot. The challenging project builds muscles that comfortable work leaves atrophied. Moreover, and this is important for those who must navigate institutional politics, volunteering for difficulty signals character to those who make advancement decisions. The man who seeks what others flee demonstrates something beyond mere competence. Consider also the thankless project, the assignment that offers much difficulty and no glory. These projects produce disproportionate growth precisely because they attract no competition. The visible projects draw the ambitious in droves. Everyone competes for the assignment that will be noticed. The invisible projects attract only those who understand that true advancement is internal before it becomes external. Capability precedes recognition. The thankless project builds capability without the distraction of performance. The difficult superior deserves particular attention. Most men flee from demanding masters as they flee from fire. They seek the gentle manager, the understanding chief, the superior who will not press too hard. But the demanding superior is a forge of unusual heat. What he exacts, he also teaches. The standards he imposes become the standards you internalize. Those who can satisfy exacting masters develop capacities that gentler environments simply cannot produce. I recall my own time under certain superiors whose demands seemed unreasonable, whose expectations appeared impossible. In the moment, I resented them. In retrospect, I recognize them as among my greatest teachers. They forced from me capabilities I did not know I possessed. They would accept nothing less than excellence, and therefore excellence was produced. The comfortable superior would have permitted mediocrity, and mediocrity would have been delivered. Professional failure, too, must be understood as investment rather than loss. Failure, properly metabolized, produces more growth than easy success ever could. The key is extraction of lesson, adjustment of approach, and re-engagement with increased capability. The man who fails and learns advances beyond the man who succeeds without challenge. The failure teaches what success conceals. What shall you do with this teaching? Examine your current professional situation with honest eyes. Identify the assignment everyone avoids, the project no one wants, the superior all fear. Move toward these, not away. When opportunity comes to take a difficult path or an easy one, choose difficulty unless clear strategy demands otherwise. Keep a professional investment ledger in your mind. What difficulties have you faced, and what capabilities have you purchased thereby? I counsel you to perform a professional difficulty audit. List every significant difficulty in your professional life over the past year. For each, note whether you sought it or received it unwillingly. Note what capability it developed. Note whether you extracted the full value or merely endured until it passed. Now list the difficulties you avoided. What capability was therefore not developed? What purchase was not made? This audit reveals your professional investment pattern with uncomfortable clarity. Several errors must be avoided. Do not seek difficulty for its own sake without strategic purpose. This is martyrdom, not wisdom. Do not ignore the political realities of your organization. Difficulty must sometimes be visible to those who matter for advancement. Invisible suffering produces growth but may not produce promotion. Do not take on more difficulty than your current capacity can metabolize. Overextension damages rather than develops. Grow gradually, building capability that can sustain greater challenges. You now possess the framework for viewing professional life as investment opportunity. Difficult assignments are no longer burdens to be avoided, but currencies to be spent. The career path is no longer a passive experience, but an active investment strategy. Vocation has become conscious crucible. But professional life is not all of life. There is another forge, often more demanding and always more intimate, the forge of relationship. The next chapter enters this most personal arena. In relationships, the pain of honest conversation, of admitting fault, of hearing criticism, of extending forgiveness when it is easier to nurse grievance. These are the prices of deep connection. The coward in matters of the heart avoids all such discomfort and wonders why his relationships remain shallow, why intimacy eludes him, why he feels alone even in company. He has refused to pay, and therefore he is not purchased. The price was available, the goods were on offer. He declined the transaction and now possesses nothing. A man of my acquaintance had been married 30 years without ever admitting fault to his wife. He prided himself on this consistency, viewing it as a kind of strength. In every disagreement, he had defended his position to the final syllable. In every conflict, he had maintained his rightness with iron determination. He had never apologized, never acknowledged error, never conceded that his perspective might be incomplete. He considered this record a form of integrity. Yet his marriage was a polite emptiness, two strangers sharing a residence. They moved about each other with the careful choreography of people who have long since ceased to truly see one another. The form of marriage remained, the substance had departed. They were legally bound and spiritually separate. His neighbor, married the same duration to a woman of similar temperament, presented a striking contrast. This second man admitted faults freely, sometimes before his wife could point them out. He received her criticisms without defense, considering them carefully before responding. He forgave readily, refusing to maintain grievances beyond their natural duration. His marriage was a genuine partnership, tested and strengthened by the very conflicts the first man had avoided. When I remarked upon the contrast, the second man offered this observation: the price of intimacy is vulnerability, and vulnerability is painful. Every honest revelation costs something. Every admission of fault wounds the pride. Every reception of criticism stings. My friend would not pay these prices. Look at what he purchased with his savings. Nothing. His marriage is a shell. Mine is a home. Here we arrive at the fundamental principle of a relational depth. Intimacy is purchased with vulnerability, and vulnerability is painful. There is no other currency that will be accepted. Each honest revelation of your true self, with all its flaws and fears, is a payment toward deeper connection. Each admission of weakness, each exposure of inadequacy, each acknowledgement that you are not the person you pretend to be, all these are deposits in the account of intimacy. The difficult conversation deserves particular attention, for here is where most relational cowardice reveals itself. When conflict arises, as conflict must in any genuine relationship, the coward moves away. He changes the subject. He leaves the room. He develops sudden interest in something else. He finds 100 ways to avoid the discomfort of direct engagement, and with each avoidance, the distance between himself and the other person grows slightly greater. The principle is this: when conflict arises, move toward rather than away. Initiate the difficult conversation before resentment demands it. Pay the price of discomfort now rather than the price of distance later. The conversation you avoid today does not disappear. It merely goes underground, where it festers and grows. When it finally erupts, as it must, the price will be far higher than what was originally demanded. Consider also the reception of criticism. When someone who loves you offers criticism of your behavior or character, the instinctive response is defense. The walls rise. The justifications pour forth. The counterattacks form. But defense blocks both the pain and the learning that pain could purchase. Learn to receive criticism without immediate defense. Pause. Ask, what is true in this? The pain of honest reception purchases the capacity for genuine growth. Forgiveness, too, is a price that must be paid for relational depth. Forgiveness is costly. It requires releasing the satisfaction of grievance. There is a peculiar pleasure in nursing wounds, in maintaining the status of victim, in holding the debt another owes you. Forgiveness surrenders this pleasure. Yet this cost purchases freedom from the prison of resentment, freedom to move forward rather than remaining bound to the past. What shall you do with this teaching? Identify the difficult conversation you have been avoiding in your most important relationship. You know the one I mean. The subject you dance around, the topic that causes both of you to tense, the matter that lies between you like an unexploded shell. Schedule the conversation. Have it. Pay the price. Notice what is purchased in the having. When next criticized by someone you love, pause before the defense rises. Ask yourself, what truth does this contain? Receive the criticism as payment toward growth rather than assault upon your worth. When resentment grows within you, move toward forgiveness deliberately, understanding it as investment rather than surrender. I counsel you to create a relational investment inventory. List your 5 most important relationships. For each, note honestly, what difficult conversation have I been avoiding? What criticism have I been deflecting? What forgiveness have I been withholding? Each item is an unpaid price, a purchase unmade, a depth unreached. Choose one item and pay this week. Record what is purchased by the payment. Several errors must be avoided. Vulnerability differs from cruelty. Paying your price should not extract unnecessary payment from others. Honesty is not brutality. Some conversations require appropriate moments. The principle is not recklessness, but courage with wisdom. If only you are paying whilst the other merely receives, examine whether the relationship itself is worth continued investment. Not all relationships deserve indefinite payment. You now see relationships as forges of transformation. The difficult conversation becomes opportunity rather than threat. The capacity for deep connection becomes a function of willingness to pay its price. Part 4 is complete. Integration into daily life, vocation, and intimacy. But what is the ultimate significance of all this? Part 5 lifts the gaze from personal advancement to something far larger, the inheritance we leave to civilization itself. The modern project of eliminating all discomfort from human life is not progressive, but deeply regressive. It does not elevate humanity. It diminishes us. It does not prepare our children for flourishing. It cripples them before they begin. This truth must be understood clearly, for the stakes extend far beyond any individual life. A society composed of individuals who understand the price of greatness is capable of meeting civilizational challenges. A society of comfort seekers will crumble before the first serious test. Consider Rome, if you will, for her history illuminates our present situation with uncomfortable clarity. Rome's virtues were forged in struggle. The long wars with Carthage, the expansion of the Republic against determined resistance, the constant testing against external threats that never permitted softening. The Roman character that conquered the known world was hammered out on the anvil of difficulty. The legions that marched from Britain to Persia were composed of men who had been raised to embrace hardship, to seek honor through sacrifice, to measure worth by service. Rome's vices were born in ease. The affluence of empire, the softening of character that accompanied generations of comfort, the gradual replacement of citizen soldiers with mercenaries because citizens no longer wished to bear the burdens of service, these were the symptoms of a civilization consuming its own capital. The very success that Rome achieved created the conditions for Rome's decline. Victory bred comfort. Comfort bred weakness. Weakness invited defeat. Every great civilization follows this arc. We are not exempt. The British character that built an empire upon which the sun never set was forged through centuries of struggle, through wars and hardships that seemed at the time to be curses, but were in truth blessings. The question facing us now is whether we shall remember, before it is too late, that ease is not progress. Here is the civilizational comfort paradox you must understand. Civilization creates comforts. Comforts weaken civilization. Weakened civilization cannot maintain comforts. The cycle ends only when members of the civilization consciously resist the softening effect of the ease they have created. Without such resistance, the pattern is inexorable. Comfort leads to weakness. Weakness leads to decline. Decline leads to the loss of the very comforts that cause the weakness. Your personal choices multiply across populations. If you choose evasion, and others like you choose evasion, the cumulative effect is civilizational weakness. Personal courage has collective consequences far beyond what the individual can perceive. The man who faces his difficulties is not merely developing himself, he is strengthening the fiber of his society. The man who evades is not merely weakening himself, he is contributing to civilizational decay. Think of it this way. Each generation inherits a civilization from those who came before, and bequeaths a civilization to those who come after. What state shall the civilization be in when you pass it along? Your relationship to difficulty determines in some small but genuine measure your contribution to the answer. The forge that makes you capable makes your civilization capable. The evasion that weakens you weakens all. Great challenges await future generations. I do not know what forms these challenges will take, but I know they will come, for they have always come. They will require sacrifice, endurance, the capacity to suffer for causes greater than personal comfort. Are we preparing those who follow us for such challenges, or are we ensuring their defeat before the battle begins? The answer to this question is not abstract. It is lived out in the daily choices of individuals who either embrace or evade difficulty. What shall you do with this larger vision? First, view your personal choices in civilizational context. Ask yourself, if everyone chose as I am choosing, what would become of us? This question lifts the stakes of daily decision from mere personal consequence to collective meaning. Second, when you observe comfort worship in society, recognize it for what it is, civilizational decay dressed as progress. Resist it in your own life as a contribution to collective strength. Third, and perhaps most importantly, teach the young by example. Show them that difficulty is not to be feared but engaged. Let them see you face challenges, absorb setbacks, and re-engage with determination. Your personal forge contributes to the collective furnace in which the next generation will be shaped. Several errors must be avoided. Do not fall into grandiosity. You cannot save civilization alone, and the pretense that you can leads to exhaustion and despair. You can only contribute. Do not fall into despair. Civilizational patterns can be influenced, though slowly. History is not deterministic. Human choices matter. Do not fall into preaching. The most effective teaching is example, not exhortation. Let your life speak. Words without embodiment convince no one. Your perspective has now lifted from personal to civilizational. The stakes of personal choice are understood to extend beyond the self. What seemed merely private is now seen as collective. The weight of responsibility has increased, and with it the dignity of choice. If civilization depends upon formed individuals, how are such individuals formed? The next chapter addresses the sacred task of education. When we shield the young from every difficulty, when we smooth every path and soften every fall, we teach them, implicitly but powerfully, that they are incapable of handling hardship. We produce a generation rich in comfort and poor in capability, possessing material abundance but spiritual bankruptcy. This is not kindness. It is cruelty disguised as love. This chapter addresses parents, educators, and all who influence the formation of youth, offering specific guidance for teaching the next generation to pay the price of greatness. I observed two fathers at a public school prize day, and the contrast between them has remained in my memory as a parable of educational approaches. The first had shielded his son from every difficulty. He had intervened in every conflict, arranged every success, smoothed every path before his son could encounter its roughness. The boy stood on the platform that day, accomplished and hollow. His achievements were genuine, his certificates authentic, but something essential was missing from his bearing. The second father had followed a different course entirely. He had allowed his son to struggle, to fail, to find his own way through difficulty with minimal intervention. When his son faced obstacles, this father did not remove them, but stood nearby, present without rescuing. The boy who stood on that platform was less polished than the first, his achievements perhaps less impressive on paper, but something solid inhabited his frame. He was substantial. He was capable. He had been tested. The first boy would shatter at the first genuine test that his father could not prevent. The second would endure. The father's love was equal. I do not doubt that both desired the best for their sons. Their wisdom was not equal. One had purchased comfort for his child. The other had purchased capability. Here is the first principle of character education. Expose the young to difficulties appropriate to their developmental stage. Too much difficulty overwhelms. The child breaks rather than bends, and emerges damaged rather than strengthened. Too little difficulty atrophies. The muscles that hardship would have developed remain weak through disuse. The art is calibration, challenge just beyond current capacity, with support that enables but does not replace effort. The second principle is this: allow failure when stakes are low so that the young may learn its lessons before stakes are high. The child who has never failed at anything cannot handle adult failure when it arrives, as arrive it must. He lacks the experience of recovery, the knowledge that failure is survivable, the confidence that comes from having risen after falling. Grant permission for instructive failure. It is among the greatest gifts you can give. The third principle addresses your role during struggle. Be present, but do not rescue. When a child faces difficulty, the instinct to intervene is powerful. We want to spare them pain. We want to smooth their path. But our rescue, however well-intentioned, teaches them that they cannot handle difficulty alone. Your presence provides safety. Your restraint provides growth opportunity. Hold both simultaneously. I recall my own education at Harrow, where I was hardly the most distinguished student. I struggled. I failed certain subjects. I was not rescued by masters who might have eased my path. Those struggles taught me something that smooth success never could have, that I could endure difficulty and emerge on the other side. That knowledge has served me better than any academic achievement. The fourth principle concerns the essential connection that must be established in the young mind. Ensure they experience the link between difficulty overcome and satisfaction earned. This connection, once felt, becomes the foundation of the appetite for productive challenge we discussed in earlier chapters. When a child struggles and then succeeds, draw attention to the relationship. Let them feel the particular satisfaction that comes only from earned achievement. Unearned success produces no such satisfaction. What shall you do with this teaching? When a child in your care faces difficulty, pause before intervening. Ask yourself, can they handle this with struggle? If the answer is yes, witness rather than rescue. Be present. Be encouraging, but do not do for them what they can do for themselves, however painfully. After difficult experiences, help the young extract lessons and recognize growth. Do not let the experience pass without reflection. Ask, what did you learn? How did you grow? What would you do differently? Create environments of appropriate challenge rather than complete safety. Model the relationship to difficulty you wish to teach. Let them see you face challenges, fail sometimes, learn from failure, and re-engage with determination. I counsel you to inventory the difficulties a child in your care faces regularly. Are they appropriate to the child's developmental stage? Too few? Too many? Where are you overprotecting, shielding them from struggles they need? Where are you under-supporting, leaving them alone with challenges beyond their current capacity? Adjust intentionally. This inventory should be revisited quarterly as the child grows. Several errors must be avoided. Challenge without support damages. The young need both difficulty and the knowledge that they are loved. Harshness is not strength. Severity without warmth produces fear, not capability. Do not project your own capacity for difficulty onto children. Calibrate to their development, not your memory of what you could handle. Each child's appropriate difficulty differs. Comparison breeds either pride or despair, neither of which serves growth. You now view education as formation in the relationship to difficulty. Overprotection is revealed as cruelty, however loving its intention. Appropriate challenge is revealed as love, however uncomfortable its process. Those who influence the young possess specific guidance for teaching the next generation to pay the price of greatness. We arrive now at the final chapter, the ultimate invitation. What shall you do with all you have learned? The ultimate promise of this work is not that you shall suffer less. No teaching can offer that promise honestly, for suffering is woven into the fabric of human existence and cannot be removed without removing existence itself. The promise is this, that you shall suffer better, that your suffering shall purchase something of value rather than being squandered upon nothing, that at the end of your days you shall look back upon a life of genuine achievement, genuine connection, genuine meaning, and know that every price you paid was worth the paying. I have now lived long enough to see many men reach the end of their journeys. I have sat with them in their final years, observed the expressions their faces have settled into after decades of accumulated choices. The contrast between two types of faces haunts me still. Those who fled from difficulty throughout their lives wear a particular expression in old age. It is the face I described when we examined the man of 80 who had played it safe. Haunted, bitter, tormented by the ghosts of all the selves he might have become. These men speak of injustice, of bad luck, of circumstances that conspired against them. But the haunting in their eyes tells a different story. They know, in the depths that words cannot reach, that they are the architects of their own emptiness. Those who paid at every toll gate wear a different expression entirely. It is not the absence of pain, for they have known more pain than the evaders, not less. It is the presence of peace. They know they spent their currency wisely. They possess what they purchased: capability, depth, character, meaning. They leave an inheritance. The contrast between these two faces at life's end is the final proof of everything I have written in these pages. In the final accounting of a human life, there is but one question that matters. Did you spend your suffering wisely, or did you waste it upon the purchase of nothing? All evasion leads to the same place, a negative answer to this question, a ledger empty of credits, a life that purchased nothing with the currency it was given. All engagement leads to a positive answer, a ledger full of hard-won acquisitions, a life that spent its suffering upon achievements and connections and growth. Here is the principle you must carry from these pages into the remainder of your days. You cannot suffer less, you can only suffer better. The quantity of suffering in a human life is not negotiable. Pain will come, difficulty will arrive. The toll gates will appear upon your road. What you can influence is the quality and return on that suffering. You can waste it, enduring without purchasing, or you can invest it, enduring whilst acquiring. What you purchase with your suffering becomes yours to bequeath. Character does not die with you. It lives on in those you have influenced. Wisdom passes to those you have taught. The example of your life, the demonstration of courage and engagement, becomes part of the inheritance of everyone who knew you. The coward bequeaths only the example of evasion, teaching those who follow that difficulty should be fled. The brave man bequeaths capability, showing that difficulty should be embraced. The opportunity to begin paying the price of greatness exists in this very hour, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, not when you feel ready. Now the currency is available. You carry it with you. The goods are on offer. They surround you. The only question is whether you shall complete the transaction. This chapter does not offer new techniques, for all the techniques have been given. It offers instead final integration. Take all that you have learned across these pages, all the practices and principles, and commit to embodiment. The difficult conversation you have been postponing, have it this week. The challenging project you have been declining, accept it. The physical discipline you have been evading, begin it. The toll gates are open. Pay. Begin to collect what is owed to you. I counsel you to perform one final exercise, the commitment ceremony. Take paper and write a commitment to yourself. Identify 3 specific prices you have been refusing to pay. Perhaps it is a conversation you have been avoiding. Perhaps it is a professional challenge you have been declining. Perhaps it is a physical discipline you have been postponing. Name them clearly, commit to paying each within a defined period, sign the commitment, place it where you shall see it daily. This ceremony marks the transition from understanding to embodiment, from reading to living. The book is not the territory. Life is the territory. You may understand everything I have written and yet live nothing of it. Understanding without application is merely entertainment. The choice before you now is whether these words shall transform your remaining days or merely occupy an afternoon. The final error to avoid is this: believing that understanding this work is sufficient without living it. The second error, beginning later, which, as we have established, means beginning never. The third error, waiting until you can pay perfectly. Do not wait. Pay imperfectly, but immediately. Imperfect payment that begins today exceeds perfect payment that begins never. You stand now at the threshold between 2 lives. One is the life of evasion that leads to the haunted face of regret, the empty ledger, the army of ghosts representing all you might have been. The other is the life of engagement that leads to the peaceful face of fulfillment, the full ledger, the inheritance passed to those who follow. The comfortable lies have been shattered. The currency is understood. The palate is educated. The coward within is identified. The practices are integrated. The civilizational stakes are grasped. The education of others is understood. Only one thing remains: the choice to pay. Cowards pay nothing, and therefore they own nothing. But you are not required to remain among their number. The choice lies before you, as it lies before all souls in this brief transit between birth and death. Choose to pay. Choose to purchase. Choose to possess what only the brave can acquire. For in the final accounting of a human life, there is but one question that matters. Did you spend your suffering wisely, or did you waste it upon the purchase of nothing? Let your answer be worthy of your existence.